special provision, Mr. President, I'll show a slide. There was a dramatic increase in the 4Ps. The red bar. There was a dramatic increase in the share of 4Ps applying to TES, Mr. President. And I thank the good sponsor for accepting that amendment that we proposed. And we also talked about this during the budget deliberation, Mr. President. So in other words, Mr. President, the share of poor students accommodated by the TES
It rose from 23 to 35.
Yeah. It rose from 23% to 35% in academic year 2023-2024, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, we submitted this proposal to reinsert this in the 2025 budget. Unfortunately, Mr. President, this was not accommodated for 2025, Mr. President. So I would like to appeal to the good sponsor if we can reinsert this in the 2025 budget, because the effect to low-income household is obviously quite significant. And I think this is also a signaling that, again, we're staying true to the intention of the law to prioritize low-income household, particularly the 4Ps, Mr. President. So at the proper time, we'll submit again some recommendations.
Actually, Mr. President, I have a short answer. We submitted that for inclusion in the 2025 Senate version committee report. Kaya lang tapos na kasi yung deliberations nila, but they assure us that it will be carried. So to be clear, we supported this provision. And then Chairman Popoy also reminded me, because I also have it here in my notes, that this policy is already part of UNIFAS. UNIFAS, no? Say UNIFAS. Yeah, it's already part. So doble-doble na yung protection natin na matutuloy natin yan.
Mr. President, if it's part of the UNIFAS, is there a need for this special provision?
Technically, no, because nandyan na, they're already doing it. But we already submitted it, so wala natin bawiin.
Mr. President. Mr. President, so double assurance, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President, for that double assurance. President. Thank you, Mr. President, for that double assurance. Mr. President, I'll jump to another topic, and this is on tulong-dulong, Mr. President. And we noticed, Mr. President, that the tulong-dulong program grew in the, well, let me backtrack, Mr. President. In the 2025 NEP, there was zero allocation to tulong-dulong program, Mr. President. And in 2020, in the 2025 GAB that was submitted to us, it grew to about 15 billion pesos, Mr. President. 2024.
Yes, sir. 8.7.
So,
Is there a question?
looking at the
Observation?
malapit na, Mr. President.
No?
Malapit na, Mr. President. Mr. President, in
Some
2023,
clarification, what percentage is the increase? Again,
well, in 2020
From zero to...
to 15 billion, Mr. President.
from 3 billion to 15 billion.
Yes, but just to set the context, Mr. President, in 2023 GAA, tulong-dulong is about 1 billion pesos. In 2024, it's about 3.7 billion pesos, Mr. President. So the tulong-dulong program for this GAB, for this year's GAB, grew by about fivefold, Mr. President. So baka lahat ng estudyante sa buong Pilipinas maging scholar na natin, Mr. President, no, with that amount, Mr. President. Is there any particular reason, Mr. President, for the dramatic increase? This is on top of the tertiary education subsidy of 20 billion.
Does His Honor assume I know how the House thinks?
Well, Mr. President, just to put that on record, and I'll go to a.
No, I think it's important that we put that on record. No.
Yeah.
His Honor pointed out that there was no amount for this item in the NEP. Correct?
Correct, Mr. President.
Because this is a congressional insertion.
Yes.
And it is a House insertion, to be clear.
Correct.
The Senate did not have a counterpart, no? So
No.
this is a House, and the objective here is to provide educational assistance to the constituents.
Yes.
I mean, we all believe in providing educational assistance. But His Honor has pointed out that it was in 2023 it was 1 billion, and then 2024 currently it's 3.7 billion, and now it's 15 billion pesos. What I as as chairperson would like to point out is that if you look at the other subsidies that we have, there are criteria for the release of these fundings. So me, as a proponent of targeted funding, so His Honor is a proponent for targeted beneficiaries, no? Very particular yung nasa listahan, nangangailangan. Ako naman po, my view naman is in the interest of nation building, we should use our collective experience, and these are policymakers, industry. We should use these as determinants for what courses are in demand. So time and again, Senator Joel Villanueva and I, just because in particular we are very much aware of the shortages in the health field of various specializations. So that's why we have our Doktor para sa Bayan that's growing very steadily. But we also continue to have a big gap in the specializations of in areas of occupational therapy, speech therapists, as His Honor knows, guidance counselors, psychologists, radiotherapists, and so on and so forth. So these are gaps that affect the delivery of healthcare in this country. And I'm sure there are other gaps in other industries as well. So this representation is a proponent of targeted benefits, at least for a certain percent of the budget available.
Yeah.
So just to put that on record.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm sure that the Tulong-Dulong program is well-intentioned in a sense that it also gives education subsidy
Of course.
to students who wants to go to school, Mr. President.
Yes.
Despite the almost five-fold increase, the intention of giving subsidies to college students is a noble intention, Mr. President. The complication there, Mr. President, is the special provision that comes with it. And let me just read the special provision.
Hanggang dito lang sa program.
In the selection of the new UAPTE TES grantees, the implementation of UAPTE TES shall likewise cover the existing grantees under the Tulong-Dulong program, subject to the prioritization as reiterated in the preceding.
That's on
Sorry. So period lang pala, Mr. President. Let me just repeat. The implementation of UAPTE TES shall likewise cover the existing grantees under the Tulong-Dulong program, Mr. President. So in other words, for next year, that 15 billion will be absorbed by the TES. And the fear there, Mr. President, it will displace the prioritization identified for the TES grantees, Mr. President. Yung 1 billion, 3 billion, I think that's manageable because the test is quite big at about 20 billion. But if you are now going to absorb 15 billion out of the 20 billion TES, and then you are in effect displacing, Mr. President, the prioritization that we talked about under the TES program. So that's a complication that I see, Mr. President. I think the 3 billion manageable yan, but size almost 70% of the entire TES budget will create complications moving forward, Mr. President. So that's just to put that on record, and that's the analysis that we came out after looking all of this data, Mr. President.
Yeah. Mr. President, I will join His Honor in his observation. Currently, what we do is whoever are the Tulong-Dulong beneficiaries, automatic yan, the next year they are absorbed sa TES. Okay. So sabi nga ng ating kasamahan, yung 1 billion worth of subsidy, so the next year kaya pa naman i-absorb. Yung 3 siguro kaya.
Kaya pa.
Pero yung 15 billion, kasi I want people to understand that kaya natin ina-absorb yun because gusto natin na beyond first year,
Correct, Mr.
tuloy-tuloy
President.
sila sa second year, third year, fourth year. That's why we're now putting them in the system so that they will get their support, their financial support, the second year, the third year, and the fourth year. And normally in our process, if the DBM can absorb it well and good. Pero if not, kaya naman natin maghanap ng extra 1 billion. Pero
Correct, Mr.
1 billion
Correct, Mr.
next
President.
year, hindi ko na alam kung saan natin kukunin yon. Hindi ko na talaga alam. So that's a problem that we are
Yes, Mr. President.
worried about. Yeah.
Correct.
And not to mention, I didn't have time to do the numbers, but I did put on record also that given the other funding, like the test, I mentioned that in my opening statement that
the amount of tests has already been reduced, no? From 60,000 a year for private school recipients, it's now 20, and for private school, public school recipients, it was previously 40, it's also now 20. Mas, with the idea being, mas dadami ang tatanggap. So, parami ng parami ng parami. And ang tanong is, ganun ba kababa yung presyo ng education? Makakatapos ba sila?
Yes, Mr. President.
Baka yung pamasahin nila dun sa 20,000 na yun hanggang half semester lang. Then the rest of the half semester, they're struggling. And this is also findings of EDCOM. Nakita ko kasi si Edie Mark, kaya naalala ko yun. Ang lakas makanad eh, kaya nakita ko kagad. But no, that's their findings. And we need to make use of the information we have to come up with policies that work.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that. Another complication, Mr. President. The maximum income for tests is 100, this is family income, is 166,000, Mr. President. The maximum income for tulong dunong is 400,000 pesos. So it's more, in a sense, it's bigger, no, more liberal, Mr. President. But if you have a family of earning 200,000 pesos, you'll fall under tulong dunong. Now, if you will be absorbed next year under TS, that family earning 200,000 will now be absorbed by the TS, displacing the 166,000 family earning that amount. Mr.
That is
President. So that is another complication in terms of displacement or disenfranchising those
The poorest of the poor.
poorest of the poor and those under the TS, Mr.
Yes.
President.
And again, bumaba na nga yung tinatanggap nila because
Correct.
of this new policy of Unifast, tapos mas marami pang ka-share. So I truly believe, Mr. President, that these are tough decisions that we have to make. Di naman natin minamaramot yung makakapag-aral, pero ang hirap i-justify na pinag-aral mo lahat ng substandard na education, and sadly, even worse, na hindi rin sila makakatapos, na wala man lang, like, what are they when they finish first year? Ano yun? Ano sasabihin mo doon?
Correct, Mr. President.
Tama. Sinusulat sila dyan undergrad, 1 year. Ganun. Ganun ang sinusulat nila.
So, Mr. President, those are the, just to put that on record, and at the proper time, we'll also suggest some ways forward. And I thank the good sponsor for acknowledging that these are tough decisions that we need to make here in the Senate and also in policy making.